The Trudeau government took the first steps today towards legalizing marijuana, today bringing experts to Parliament to speak on the issue. CTV's Joanne Schnurr joins us live. Joanne, this may take longer than many people were hoping.
Well, that's right. Legalizing marijuana was one of the Trudeau government's key election promises, but it's a complicated issue. And as we heard today, until there's a new law, the current laws will have to be enforced and obeyed. Cynthia Gosson traveled with her son from Toronto to take in this Liberal caucus meeting on legalizing marijuana. After decades of debate in Canada, the issue appears to be moving forward.
I think we're in the process and we've got to go forward with this. I'm not sure how long it will take because I do feel Canada has a role to do it properly.
That was the resounding sentiment around this table.
I believe we have a responsibility here to do this right. Liberal
MP and former Toronto Police Chief Bill Blair has been given the lead role on this file for the Trudeau government.
And I know there are many who are saying, well, let's hurry up and get on with it. Well, we're getting on with it, but it is a very complex issue.
Issues around organized crime, jurisdiction, and health concerns, particularly for young people.
We talked about today what are some of the impacts. Increased risk of collision. Unfortunately, a lot of people are using marijuana in combination with alcohol, and that just further increases the risk.
Then there's the question about those still getting busted for pot possession.
British Columbia spends $10 million a year on pot possession cases, and I'm sure across the country the numbers are just as high. That's money that should be spent on health care, not on arresting peaceful Canadians who are criminals today but are going to be encouraged to buy pot legally in a year from now.
The chiefs of police admit the dialogue has been confusing for them too.
I think it would be helpful if the government would release some sort of an action plan with the steps that they're going to go through that would provide some possible timelines so that the expectations can start to be lessened a little bit.
Until that happens, though, police will continue to enforce the current law, and people are expected to obey it. So when will marijuana become legal? Well, Bill Blair said the process will take as long as it takes, but that the Trudeau government is committed to seeing it happen. Graham.
Okay, CTV's Joanne Schnurr reporting live. Thanks, Joanne.
Good evening. How would you feel about your local drugstore selling marijuana? Well, tonight we're a lot closer to that idea becoming a reality.
As CTV's Scott Hurst reports, 2 of BC's most popular drugstores are now making plans to become pot retailers.
The same place where you fill out your prescriptions may also become a place where you can pick up marijuana.
Yes, we're looking at this strictly as a medical marijuana.
With almost 80 stores across Western Canada, London Drugs says it is preparing all of its pharmacies and exploring the idea of selling legal pot.
The infrastructure, the reporting, and the models already established.
And they're not the only company lining up to potentially sell marijuana. In a statement, Shoppers Drug Mart says, quote, "We believe that dispensing medical marijuana through pharmacy, like other medications, is the safest option." And late last year, BC liquor stores announced they too are exploring the idea of selling weed right next to the wine.
Why would anybody do this other than to make money? I mean, we know the risks of alcohol and tobacco. We know the cost to our society. You know, we do not need a third legal addictive drug on the market.
While retailers await what could be a major upheaval to the laws currently regulating both recreational and medical marijuana, customers are left wondering who benefits and what's in it for them.
I think it's still a good idea. It would be more control. And pharmacy already know how to control medication.
If they start to sell it in a pharmacy and make it available, easily available for people to purchase, I just don't think it's a good thing. Okay. That means we're going to have a lot of doped up people on the streets, right?
And Scott Hurst is at the London Drugs at Georgia and Granville in Vancouver tonight. So, Scott, what about other drugstores?
Despite what companies like London Drugs and Shoppers Drug Mart are saying, Rexall announced today it is not on board with selling medical marijuana. Mike?
Scott, thank you.
Medical marijuana patients like Stephen Stairs are calling the decision a major victory.
The ruling today definitely set precedents for patients' rights going forward in this country.
Legally blind, Stairs uses the drug to treat a genetic eye condition, and growing the plants himself allows him to save money.
Producing it in your own home from about $1 a gram to anywhere between $10 to $12 a gram, buying it on the, quote, licensed market.
The Conservative government barred patients from growing their own cannabis, forcing them to buy from a licensed retailer or the black market. That legislation, the federal court judge wrote, infringed on charter rights and adversely impacted patients.
If you believe in freedom in this country, if you believe in allowing people the autonomy to make medical decisions for themselves, this victory should speak to you.
The Liberal government now has 6 months to rework the law. It could also appeal.
We will be looking at that ruling and making an assessment as to how we will respond to that.
The ruling comes as Shoppers Drug Mart and London Drugs say they want a piece of the multi-million-dollar marijuana market, insisting if they sell it, it's safest.
And patients that use medical marijuana may also be on other medications that have potential drug interactions.
And on the Liberal promise to legalize recreational marijuana, still no timeline.
It will take as long as it takes, but I am quite anxious to get on with it and to do it as quickly as possible.
The opposition is accusing the government of creating more ambiguity.
They moved ahead with signaling that pot is legal all across this country. That's what everyone actually thinks, when in fact, the law doesn't say that yet.
The Liberals underlined that too today, saying that until marijuana laws change, using the drug recreationally, Lisa, is still illegal.
All right, Omar Sachedina in the Ottawa Bureau tonight. Thanks, Omar.
Now, just because people can grow their own pot doesn't mean they will, and for Big Pharma, that's a big opportunity. CTV's Rob Buffum now with how conventional pharmacies hope to cash in.
The aisle of your local drugstore could soon be stocked with pot.
We fully anticipate we will be ready to support the public that needs it on a medicinal basis.
Retail giant London Drugs says it's already preparing to sell the drug as soon as it's allowed to.
And we feel pharmacists working with prescribing doctors and other allied health professionals are in a perfect position to provide a positive, health outcome.
That sentiment echoed by Canada's largest drugstore. Shoppers Drug Mart is reportedly also exploring the market and told CTV today, "We believe that dispensing medical marijuana through pharmacy, like other medications, is the safest option." One of Canada's licensed medical pot producers says it's recently been approached by 2 major pharmacy retailers about buying its bud. It won't name them, but attributes their interest to new laws that allow medical pot to be consumed and therefore sold as an oil or pill.
So when you're talking to your pharmacist about your medicine, what else do you speak about that you smoke?
This interest from pharmacies comes mere months after BC liquor stores lobbied to sell weed, hoping to pair beer with bud.
I don't think anybody would turn down an opportunity to have another revenue source.
The so-called green rush triggered by Ottawa's promise to legalize recreational pot, a move that will inevitably affect all aspects of the industry, including medical pot.
This is the first time a new commodity has been brought to market since the synthetics revolution in the 50s.
Asked today about a proposal for medical pot in drugstores or recreational bud at liquor stores, the Premier wasn't ruling out these options.
You know, we're taking all of the ideas out there, trying to understand where the federal government wants to go so that we can be quick and ready to respond when the law changes.
A change that could allow your pharmacist to fill your prescription for pot. Robert Buffum, CTV News, Victoria.
London Drugs has joined Shoppers Drug Mart in considering a venture into the medical marijuana business.
When the federal government does that and create the legislation and the framework, we fully anticipate we will be ready to support the public that needs it on a medicinal basis.
A federal court struck down regulations Wednesday that restricted medical marijuana patients from growing their own cannabis. Now the Liberals have 6 months to come up with new rules. Joining us from Ottawa is Mark Zekulin. He is the president of medical marijuana company Tweed. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, I'm well, thanks. And I imagine you were watching all of this kind of happen yesterday with close attention. Tell me, because we know the stocks on some of the, licensed producers, the companies such as yourself, had dropped Canopy, Afria, that kind of thing. What did you think when the ruling came out?
Well, it's never a dull day in the cannabis sector. I think what this ruling means is the government set up a system about 2.5 years ago to give patients access to medical cannabis. And the court affirmed something that we're all coming to know and accept, which is that people have a right to medical cannabis. And then the court went further and said that the existing system doesn't give the access that patients need. So that puts the ball back in the government's court. They have a time period now to examine how to fix that. It could be anything from allowing some people to grow at home, to improving access into the new system, to even looking at better insurance coverage for medical cannabis. So more access is a good thing.
Well, and obviously this is a multi-million-dollar business at this stage, only certain to grow. What was your reaction to Shoppers Drug Mart, saying that it might get in on it as London Drugs is now joined?
Yeah, my big takeaway from that is, if ever there was a stigma around medical marijuana, it seems to be gone. When you see some of the biggest names in pharmacies, which are part of even bigger companies, Loblaws, looking to get involved in the sector, I think it means that the stigma is gone, the conversation has advanced, and again, anything that leads to to improved access and more acceptance of medical marijuana is a good thing.
But what does it mean for a licensed producer such as yourself in terms of business if down the road it is absolutely acceptable for people to grow their own marijuana for medicinal purposes and or go to a drugstore to get it? What does it do to your business?
Well, I think the analogy on your first point is if you look at people who brew your own beer or make your own wine, people can go to places and do that, but most actually choose not to because they enjoy the convenience of buying from a producer that's licensed, that's regulated, that is affordable, and that you can conveniently buy online. And I think we'll continue to see if that exists, even if people can grow at home. And on the pharmacy side, if that were to come to be, again, they have to get the product from somewhere, and the government has set up a really robust and high quality system for production of cannabis that is really the envy of the world. So I don't see that ending anytime soon. Let
me ask you this. I mean, it's one thing for somebody to grow a plant in their home. It's another thing, as I understand it, to make cannabis oil, which is another product that you're looking at selling.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. The conversation is largely just people thinking about dried marijuana, but there are other types of cannabis. Just literally today, our company will start selling cannabis oils. And the equipment that we've had to invest in and the procedures that we've created are hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment to ensure very high quality product that is tested, is labeled, is clean. There's no butane or anything like that in it. And again, people just can't do that in their own houses. So there's always going to be a need for companies that are investing in research and technology to make better products for people.
Mark Zekulin, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot.
Thousands of medical marijuana users are breathing a sigh of relief this morning after a federal court ruled yesterday that they can grow their own pot. Our neighbors south of the border in Colorado were reacting to this news, where in their state both medical and recreational use of marijuana is legal. Joining us this morning is Louis Koski. He's the Senior Deputy Director of the Enforcement Division, and he's joining us this morning from Denver. Thanks so much for being on our program.
Thanks for having me.
So marijuana has been legal, for 2 years now in Colorado. How is it working out?
Well, we think things have been going really well here in Colorado. We've had the advantage of having medical marijuana laws on the books for almost a dozen years before we legalized. And so in a lot of ways, we were able to address some of those preliminary challenges that you face implementing this kind of policy well in advance of the legalization phase of implementation.
Talk to us more about those challenges and perhaps ones that we can anticipate here in Canada.
Well, we have taken a really collaborative approach to our rulemaking process because there are so many challenges, and the implementation of marijuana legalization really covers a lot of different professions, and so we found it really helpful to be able to bring people with all different types of viewpoints and areas of expertise to work through a lot of the regulations. So for us, for example, edibles regulation was a real challenge. I think we were a little surprised by the notion that so many people were interested in edible products compared to the smokable marijuana product. And so we had to go through a number of rulemaking processes to really get the edible regulations to a point where we really felt like we were addressing the primary consumer safety and public safety issues that were part and parcel to having that type of product available for sale on commercial locations.
What's your advice for Canadian lawmakers, particularly in the area of medical marijuana? It's established here already, but certainly there's work to be done. What's your advice for folks here in this country?
Well, I think it's really first important to understand that that a lot of times the science has not really caught up to both the statutes and the regulations, and we've certainly experienced that here in Colorado. Marijuana is purported to help out with a number of different ailments. And so a lot of what's happening in Colorado is being focused on evidence-based policy, where we can really get a better understanding of whether or not a product really helps with a particular condition. So that's certainly one of those challenges, not just facing Colorado, but really facing any jurisdiction that's looking to take on the policy that's a little bit more permissive with respect to medical marijuana.
And what about the illegal drug trade? Now that marijuana is legal in Colorado, do you find that there's less crime?
Well, we really focus on three things as our policy objectives, and that's one is to make sure that we're keeping this out of the hands of anyone who's under 21 years of age, especially with respect to the retail side. We're also looking to make sure that we're doing everything we can on the front end when we're licensing businesses to ensure that the criminal element isn't part of those businesses holding those licenses. And then, of course, too, we're really focused on whether or not marijuana grown and produced in the regulated market is being diverted outside of that marketplace. And so we focus, for example, on the underage concern. We focus really heavily on dedicating resources to testing our licensees to ensure that they're not selling to individuals who are under 21 years of age. And then with respect to the diversion piece, we have a very robust product accountability computer system that's statewide, where all of our licensees have to have accounts in there, and they have to account for all of their product from seed to sale. And so in a lot of ways, we're addressing the black market concern through those three policy objectives.
Louis Koski, Senior Deputy Director of the Enforcement Division, joining us this morning from Denver, Colorado. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back. Well, he used to bust kids for possession of pot. Now the former top cop is in charge of making it legal to smoke, eat, and heck, even uses lip balm if you want. MP Bill Blair joins us live from the foyer of the House of Commons. Mr. Blair, I guess you never thought you'd, while wearing the badge, that you'd become the sort of policy prince of legalized pot, did you?
Well, Don, let me be really clear about something. My responsibility is to replace the criminal sanction for marijuana and to replace it with a strict regulatory framework that I think is going to do a much better job of protecting our kids and getting organized crime out of it, making our communities safer, and helping keep Canadians healthier. And so this one makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. What do you see as the biggest obstacles to getting this legislation and those regulations moving forward?
Well, you know, it's a complex issue, and there's a lot of different opinions, and we've got to make sure that we achieve what we're setting out to achieve. And our goals in this are primarily to protect our kids, to keep marijuana out of the hands of kids. And right now, Canada has the highest marijuana usage among youth between the ages of 15 and 24 in the entire developed world. We want to get organized crime out of this because organized crime's activity results in a lot of violence and victimization in neighborhoods right across this country. We want to make it fairer for Canadians who are being charged criminally and incarcerated for nonviolent marijuana-related offenses. And very importantly, we want to be able to facilitate a robust public health response because there are some health issues associated to the use of this drug. We think all of that can be achieved much more effectively using regulation as opposed to the hammer of a criminal charge.
Right. Do you think there's a big problem right now and that the kids out there or even adults are confused because they keep hearing legalization's on the way, but really if you're caught with the stuff, you're still going to get a record?
Well, it's really important for people to understand the law of the land is still the law of the land, and the laws of Canada should be upheld and obeyed. And that's certainly a message until we implement a regulatory framework and legalize marijuana. People have to continue to obey the law. I think one of the problems is in a lot of the discourse, and even as we began this discussion at the outset of your show, Don, you mentioned only the legalization aspect, and I think it's very important for Canadians to understand our government's commitment to establishing a strong and strict regulatory framework to control the production and the distribution of marijuana.
Do you oppose, or at first blush, do you think putting them in drugstores, Shoppers Drug Mart, or London Drugs out west, is that something you'd even consider?
Well, I think one of the things we're going to do is in the coming weeks, we're going to establish a federal provincial task force that is going to be looking at a number of these things and coming back and making recommendations to the government. We're also consulting very broadly with a lot of different industry sectors and commercial sectors, but also experts and scientists. We've made a commitment to have evidence-based public policy. And I think the way you do that is you go and you look at the research and you look at the evidence. Our commitment is to do this right, and we're going to fulfill that commitment and make sure that we do look out for the best interest of Canadians' safety and their health, and I think the best way to do that is to look at the evidence. So there are a number of distribution models that certainly we're prepared to look at, but I'm not trying to prejudge those things. I think we've got to look at the evidence first.
One thing that was raised by this court decision out west, Mr. Blair, was that if you're using medicinal marijuana, you can grow it under this ruling. Does that suggest to you that one day legalized marijuana can be grown by everybody, or do you anticipate always keeping it as a very controlled substance sold to people by others that you've approved in those regulations?
Well, I can tell you, first of all, in my experience with the existing MMPR regulations, where licensed producers are producing them using quality manufacturing practices and in a very clinical laboratory type setting, I have gained confidence in the ability of that type of production to address some of the health and safety concerns of Canadians. But at the same time, the recent decision that only came down today, Don, and it's being reviewed by both Ministry of Health and Ministry of Justice officials, who will be, after they've had an opportunity to look at it, coming back with recommendations to our ministers. And so until that happens, I'm a little reluctant to comment on the decision. But again, we have the experience of a couple of years of the utilization of the MMPR regulations, and we have the experience of other jurisdictions, Colorado and Washington in particular, and so we are going to look hard at the experience of others, try to determine what works best in order to fulfill our responsibilities, as we've said, to do this thing right.
Do you anticipate any pushback or friction with countries where it's still a crime if we sort of trailblaze the way to a full national legalization?
Don, we don't do this in isolation, and Canada is a signatory to a number of international conventions, and so there's an important discussion that has to take place with our international partners, particularly the United States and European countries. But we have responsibilities there. But those discussions are ongoing, and I am also aware that there are important discussions taking place about Canada's approach, and I think people are looking to us to come up with what may be perceived as best practice. I think a lot of places, we've already seen a number of American states have moved in this direction, but people are trying to learn from the experience of others, some of whom have experienced some difficulties. We're going to do the research, we're going to do this thing right, and I think that'll provide great reassurance to our international partners.
One quick question. Some people say Ralph Goodale said this is going to take years as the public safety minister. Do you think it's going to take years, or could this be moved up?
Yeah, it's difficult. A lot of people want a very precise timeline from me, and quite frankly, I'm committed to doing it right, and however long that takes. The one thing I can tell you, Don, is that we're going to work expeditiously. In the throne speech, our government clearly articulated our intention to legalize, regulate, and restrict marijuana. It is a direction that we've received from the Prime Minister. I've been given the task, and I'm committed to working with my minister and the Minister of Public Health, Minister of Public Safety. We'll work hard at this, and we'll go as fast as we can, but I'm not going to compromise our ability to do it right, to look hard at the evidence and to make sure that we come up with a framework that will work for Canadians and achieve the goals that we've set out.
Okay, Bill Blair, thanks for joining us. Appreciate this.
Thanks, Don.
Official opposition leader Rona Ambrose joins us from the foyer of the House of Commons. Rona, let's get to this pot off the top. You had some pretty harsh views on legalized marijuana and medicinal marijuana when you were health minister. Have you changed your view on this?
Well, what my view is now is that the Liberals have made a huge incoherent mess out of this. On one hand, they're saying that they have to keep it out of the hands of kids because it's dangerous for their mental health, which is what I was saying as health minister. But at the same time, everyone thinks it's legal because Justin Trudeau has been elected and he's for legalizing pot. Now we've got some premiers saying they want to sell it in LCBOs and drugstores want to sell it instead, but pot growers and pot activists want to be able to grow it at home and anywhere they want to. So it's a bit of a mess. And all that to say, now the chiefs of police are trying to figure out if they're supposed to enforce the law or not enforce the law, but it's a bit of a mess. And I guess it's up to the Prime Minister to fix it.
Can you see the Conservative Party under your leadership voting in favor of legalization if it came to the floor of the House of Commons like that?
Well, I think, listen, we are not in favor of legalization. We've always said we would look at decriminalization. I don't think that, at least I don't think that we have to be looking at, people having a record for small possessions, adults. But here's the problem, is that there is still a public health element to this that is a serious issue around kids. So how do you move forward with some kind of a framework where you restrict it to kids? And one of the things we did was funded a large public health campaign aimed at parents and kids to talk about these issues. And I've encouraged the government to continue on with that, because especially right now when there's so much confusion with their policy, and we do know that pot dispensaries are selling to kids, parents are wanting to know what's going on. So, we funded a hotline for parents to be able to call. And there's lots of good information out there through the Canadian Psychiatric Association or the Canadian Pediatric Association. So I encourage parents to get in touch with those kinds of organizations to make sure they know how to protect their kids, how to have good conversations with their kids about the potential mental health impacts. But again, I just think that Mr. Trudeau's made a bit of a mess out of all of this, because they moved ahead with signaling that pot is legal all across this country. That's what everyone actually thinks, when in fact, the law doesn't say that yet. So the chiefs of police are confused, parents are confused, apparently shopkeepers are confused. So there's a lot to work out over the next little while for Mr. Trudeau.
It's caucus day in Ottawa, so let's bring in NDP leader Tom Mulcair for one of his regular updates on a whole mess of topics. Welcome to the show, Mr. Mulcair.
Good to see you, Don.
Marijuana seems to be the topic today. What's your idea of what would be the best roadmap to get from where we are now, where people are still being persecuted for simple possession, to legalization? What's it going to take?
Well, we think that the easy starting point would have been decriminalization. That can be done overnight. The Liberals have said, and it was Ralph Goodale in the papers last week in Quebec saying could take a couple of years because it's complicated, which is actually true. It's complicated. So let's do the thing that can be done right away. The police are asking for it. Judges are starting to have trouble. A lot of people believe that they can sort of hold up the Liberal campaign promise and get off. They can't. The law is still there. So I guess you could say that the Liberals have to stop stonewalling.
Ooh, I knew there was going to be something like that. But do you support the idea, I know you were asked about it earlier today, of an amnesty for people who've been convicted for simple possession once the legalization's put in place?
I think that we're going to have to get there because there are so many people being arrested now. I was talking to one of my colleagues today, and there was somebody arrested in their riding with a small amount for personal use and a plant. And they're going to be prosecuted, and they'll have a criminal record. I don't think any adult who's using that for personal purposes should ever again have a criminal record, but the law is still there. And interestingly enough, instead of removing the confusion like the police are asking for, the Liberals are actually adding to it. I don't know if you caught it yesterday, but our Justice Minister said people should obey the law. Well, it's not conditional. And by putting it in the conditional, she was sort of saying, well, maybe it's wishy-washy. It's not. So they should actually get to it and get it done.
Quick point I thought on this this court case out in BC where they said medicinal marijuana growers can grow their own plants.
Yes.
Another setback for the Harper Law and Order agenda, I guess.
Yeah, but it was a big mistake from the beginning. They tried to ignore the fact that there had been evidence before the courts on that, on the legal injection site called Insight, and the Supreme Court kept saying, look, you're allowed to have your own beliefs, but you're not allowed to substitute facts with those beliefs, and that's what happened.